Joining me right now is Indiana Senator Mike Braun. He is also a member of the Budget, Appropriations, and Agriculture Committees. Also joining the conversation all morning long this morning is Dagan McDowell and Joe Concha. Senator Braun, it's great to have you this morning. Thanks very much for being here. You voted against that bill yesterday. Tell us why.
Well, thanks for having me on. Well, for me, I generally vote out of principle and not whatever the issue of the day is. And clearly, thank goodness, I guess Republicans have had an epiphany that we finally are at a point where we got to hold firm. I want to be clear. We've gotten to $28 trillion in debt. It's been an equal opportunity endeavor over the years. This kind of unholy alliance here in D.C. to roll over for the other side to give them what they want and vice versa has driven it. But I voted against this because I believe in things like budgeting, regular order. And when you've got Bernie Sanders, chair of the Budget Committee, I don't know that he's ever done one. And we're in a place where I come from, Main Street America, running an enterprise that is so dependent on a lot of the nonsense that comes out of here, it's at a crisis state. So finally, we're holding the line, and we better stick with it. I generally vote against stuff, even when I like the policy, if it doesn't have a real pay for or an offset. There are only a handful of us that do that, Maria. That's why we're in the pickle that we're in.
Yeah, I mean, look, Senator, the Democrats don't need you or the Republicans to actually raise the debt ceiling, right? They can do this on their own, but they want all of you to be able to say, yeah, we voted for this. We said yes so that we could raise the debt ceiling and keep borrowing.
And yes, that's a political maneuver because they want to share the blame. Yeah. In the past, generally, we've had divided government to where you had to have both sides buying into CRs, raising debt limits and all that stuff. This is different. And what the public needs to understand is with the rescue bill already under our belt, 1.9 trillion rounded up to 2, this additional 4 to 5, that's 6 to 7 trillion spread out over 8 to 10 years. But let's just say 600 billion a year on top of our chronic trillion-dollar deficits. And even if you pay for some of it, we're now getting close, and it's going to be immediate, running $1.5 trillion deficits. That is going to drive interest rates up. You know what Powell's considering doing. We haven't felt the pain to date. We're going to feel it soon if we don't get a little political will and discipline in this place.
So even as the government nears running out of money, the president says he's still hopeful that he can push through this massive reconciliation bill. It's what Biden and his administration are saying about the cost. This was really mind-blowing this weekend. Here's Joe Biden. Watch this.
Every time I hear this is going to cost A, B, C, or D, the truth is, based on the commitment that I made, it's going to cost nothing because we're going to raise the revenue.
This package, the reconciliation package, would cost $0.
Senator, how do they get away with saying this is not going to cost any money?
Well, because they've gotten used to being a little quicker footed than we are. We don't articulate our message well. They try to sell you anything. And taxes, when you try to raise them, that's variable because you're going to have avoidance, you're going to have lower economic growth, and they ought to take a cue from what was really working pre-COVID. I was in the mix for 37 years running my little business that became a national one. We had the sweet spot where revenues were growing at record rates, spending was still exceeding at 2 to 3%, mostly driven by entitlements, a broken healthcare system. That's the kind of stuff we really need to talk about, not deluding the American public that this is going to be revenue neutral and it's going to put a damper on the economy. Yeah. We'll get back into the Obama doldrums and we'll still have all the same problems underlying where we're at now. So that's where Republicans, as we come out of this, have to offer good ideas on the problems in this that confront all of us, especially on Main Street. Or we just keep going down the same pathway that this place has been going down for decades.
Yeah, and not only that, but the Congressional Budget Office has not even given the reconciliation package a score, right? I mean, Maya McGuinness at the Committee for a Responsible Budget says passing a reconciliation bill without a CBO score would make a mockery of the entire budget process. She's telling the Congress not to vote on this. Senator, what is likely? Do you think infrastructure will pass Thursday? And does the reconciliation package get pushed out to November, which is what some of the Wall Street sources are betting on?
Could be the case, but when they linked the two, that's why I wasn't for the hard infrastructure bill. It had soft pay-fors to boot, but Pelosi said clearly, and she generally tells you what they're going to do. They're kind of like political entrepreneurs, and their growth business is the federal government, and they're honest about it. She's run into a pickle here because they've got a wrestling match within their own party between the progressives, which generally run the show, and a few moderates that remain. So I think it's going to be pared down on the soft infrastructure into that 2 to 2.5 trillion. They'll try to sell it as a bargain. We're going to borrow most of the money, and they're going to get through it because they've invested so much political capital into it. They'd have a lot of egg on their face if they don't, and I do think she'll herd them into it because they can do it all on their own. They just got to make sure the progressives get along with the few moderates that are left, and we'll get something, and it's not going to be good for the American public. An inflation and debt bomb that's going to explode over the years. We'll all be on a sugar high coming into the midterm elections, and it'll be confusing for many.
Yeah, I mean, it's a sugar high, but even the infrastructure package has tax increases in it. Isn't that right? I know there's a crypto tax, among others. And what did the Republicans get for the infrastructure plan? I mean, I know that you and your colleagues want to appear that you all have common ground, but you didn't even get any infrastructure at the border. Right? I mean, you didn't even get an acknowledgement that there's a crisis at the border. Why vote for infrastructure, opening a door for the larger reconciliation spending package when the Republicans aren't getting much?
No, and that's how we get outmaneuvered all the time. And that's where we got to be quicker footed and get something in return. And the hard infrastructure, normally roads and bridges, is only about 10% of it. And we got to point that stuff out. Otherwise, we're moving into a socialist agenda that we're going to get some dose of it, and they're going to try to sell it into the midterms, having all this money floating around in the economy in a way that is going to be good for us. I'm worried about Main Street entrepreneurs, and the vaccine mandate is something we didn't talk about. That, in talking to businesses across Indiana, across the country, I still touch base with mine that I ran for 37 years. That is going to be the most perilous navigation through this whole journey. When you lower the definition of a small business from 500 to 100, again, they think they can get by with all of that without being called out. I'm going to call them out on all of that. And if we don't do better at it, we're going to get a lot of this craziness, not only now, but down the road.
Well, thank you for calling it out, because I've got to tell you, Senator, from vaccine mandates, forcing companies to put these rules in place, to surveilling your bank account, to censoring information and lying to the American people, this is right out of the Chinese Communist Party playbook. And Americans know it. They are watching all of it. So, Senator, we'll be watching you and your colleagues. Thanks very much for being here this morning. Mike Braun is in D.C. Thank you, sir.